My name is Solomon Trend. I work for Universal Beneficial Amalgamated Insurance. I'm sure you've never heard of us. We are a clearinghouse for hundreds of small, independent insurance companies. I have been with the same company for 22 years and have never thought about changing jobs. The job is boring and fits my personality perfectly. Don't get me wrong, I'm not unhappy or discouraged. I'm just not very motivated. My personal life is a lot like my career. I have been married for 23 years and have twin daughters, Rose and Iris, who attend Albright College. I also have a 4-bedroom house with a huge mortgage that I used to pay for my college tuition. My wife, Marcy, never worked and never wanted to work. Our income was adequate, but nothing more. Despite this, I managed to save about $40,000 over the years. My marriage was always warm. I waited and hoped for more. I tried all the usual techniques to revitalize the relationship, but nothing worked. Today, I found out why. It was a normal day at UBI, boring as hell. It was after lunch when the phone rang. It was my wife's cell phone. She very rarely calls me at work, so I was interested. "Hi, Solomon, old buddy. How are you doing? I haven't heard from you in a while." "Yes. Who is this, and why are you using my wife's cell phone?" "This is Brad, Solomon. Brad Mercer. You remember me, don't you? I'm the guy you stole Marcy from. What was that, about 25 years ago?" Of course I remembered. I didn't steal her. He'd left town, and I'd picked her up after he left. I would never steal another man's girl. In my mind, she was fair game. "Yes, I remember, but I'd still like to know what you're doing with her phone." "Well, Solomon, it goes like this. I was in town on business and called her. We met for lunch, then one thing led to another, and we ended up in my hotel room. She's taking a shower now, so I thought I'd have a chat with you." "What the hell are you talking about?" "She said she wanted to get cleaned up before she went home so you wouldn't be upset. You want to hear something funny, Solomon? Listen to this." There was a short pause, and then I heard the sound of some kind of motor running. I couldn't make out what it was. "Did you hear it, Solomon? It was a hairdryer. Can you believe it? I asked her to meet me for lunch, and she brought a mini hairdryer with her. What does that tell you, Solomon?" "What do you want, Brad? Why are you calling?" "I just want to thank you for stealing my girl. How does it feel to know I'm better than that anyway? You may be married to her, but her heart is still mine. Why else would she be here?" I disconnected the call and blocked the number. I didn't need to know anything else. That call answered a lot of questions I'd had over the past couple years. It took less than an hour to fire me and forward my paycheck and vacation pay to my brother in Huntsville. I went to the bank and cleared out all the accounts. I didn't pay off any credit cards or mortgages. I forwarded the first-class mail to my brother as well. I had just finished loading all the stuff into the car when Marcy arrived. "Solomon, what's going on? Why is your car full of stuff?" I was sitting at the kitchen table finishing my coffee when she placed several bags of groceries on the counter. "Oh, you noticed." There was silence for a moment as she began unloading the bags. Halfway through, she stopped and turned around. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" She waited, spreading her arms out to the sides. I set my cup on the table and walked over to the counter. Digging through my purse, I pulled out a bright red metal mini hairdryer. I simply picked it up and waited for a reaction or explanation. She froze for a moment, then took a deep breath and quietly left the room. 5 minutes later, I was on the road heading for Huntsville. My brother Bob and his wife Barbara were happy to see me. It had been several years since we had gotten together. Bob and I chatted for a while Barbara prepared dinner. I managed to explain the whole situation without much emotional lapse. He seemed impressed that I took it all so calmly. I was exhausted after the long drive, so I headed home right after dinner. Bob was already up and gone when I got out of bed. He was working at the Toyota plant north of Huntsville. Barbara volunteered to drive me around town and help me get settled in. It wasn't that hard. I got a new driver's license and arranged to deliver mail to Bob's house. Barbara followed me to CarMax, and 20 minutes later I had a check for a Honda CR-V. As soon as Bob got home from work, we headed to the Rocket City RV Center. Barbara and I had lunch at the Olive Garden. I wasn't too picky, and after several hours I finally settled on a small Rialta. It was prepared for me the next day. The sales rep spent several hours telling me everything I needed to know about the operation and maintenance of my new home. I took it as is, except that I had 4 new tires installed. Barbara was happy to help me put all the necessary items around the house, and Bob put together a small toolkit taken from his crowded garage. The next morning, I left. There was no plan. There was no destination. Whatever happened, it happened. Wherever I ended up, that was where I was meant to be. That's not to say that I didn't prepare for possible situations. I behaved lightly, but I wasn't careless or stupid. I avoided traffic jams. I avoided big cities during rush hours. I avoided bad weather. I didn't look for problems, but I tried to stay out of them. I spent the first 2 weeks just driving. I was an avid follower of the 15 free parking lots for nomads and figured I'd try them all by the end of the year. The problem was that at this rate, I would soon use up almost all of my gasoline supply. Although I had nothing planned, I decided to look for some opportunity. It was the middle of July and I was in South Dakota. I had no plans. It just happened. I had always heard of Sturgis, but since I had absolutely no interest in motorcycles, I never thought about traveling there. The third place I stayed at offered me free parking, free food, and some money from under the table if I stayed the whole month. I had no bartending experience, so I spent the next 5 weeks working in the kitchen. Running the Clipper wasn't hard, and I even had the opportunity to work in the kitchen for a bit. It was a little hectic, but exciting. I was attentive and learned a few things in that short time. The convention was only 10 days long, but everything was active both before it started and after it was over. I was busy every day, all day long. It was exciting to say the least. By the end of the month, I felt qualified to cook most fast food meals, but I wasn't a chef. I lasted a week after it was over and then headed out west. 2 weeks later, I got a job cooking at a campground near Cody, Wyoming. Free parking, free food, and money under the table. How could I complain? After 3 months, the weather started to get a little chilly and I left, promising to return the following spring. They were happy, and I got a lot more experience and some more money for traveling. The last sign I saw said something about the Shoshone National Forest, but I had no idea where the hell I was. It was a nice day, so I pulled into a spot that appeared to be set aside for parking. It was a nice neighborhood, away from the noise of traffic. Since I wasn't in a hurry to go anywhere, I decided to stay for a few days or until someone chased me away. That's when I met Micah. He came up to the camper while I was enjoying the sunset. He was a little rough for an old man, but he didn't look like a bum or a waif. "The coffee smells good. Do you have an extra cup?" "Yes, sir." I poured him a cup and pulled out a folding chair from under the Rialta. "My name is Solomon, like the king. And you?" "My name is Micah, not like any king I know." He smiled at his own wit. For a few minutes we sat and chatted about the weather, the view, and other insignificant things. "Where's your car, Micah?" "I don't have one. I walked." "From where?" "From home." His short answers were beginning to irritate and frustrate. "Is it close?" "No, not really. I've been walking for 2 days." "Are you hungry?" "Yes, I could eat. Have you got anything on hand? I don't want to deprive you of food." One thing led to another, and eventually I fed Micah, and then he spent the night in the van. The next morning, we had a leisurely breakfast and chatted some more. "Micah, does anyone know you're here?" "Oh, yes, my granddaughter Ottilie. She knows where I am." "Isn't she worried?" "Why would she worry? I always come home." I was at a loss. "You know, Solomon, maybe I should go home. I need to change my underwear and put on some new socks." "Hey, a bath and a shave wouldn't hurt either, old man." 30 minutes later, Micah and I were on our way. The only town sign I could see said Lander, but I still didn't know where I was. I should have bought a GPS for the van before I left. Maybe I'll buy one for myself for Christmas. After an endless series of driving directions, we finally ended up in front of a cabin-type house, half stone, half log. Very picturesque, so to speak. She was standing on the porch waiting for us. She seemed to know we were coming, and I realized she did. "Thank you for bringing Saba home. I was afraid I was going to have to pick him up." She was tall, with bronze skin and black hair. I couldn't say anything else because she was dressed in loose jeans and flannel. The term Saba was an interesting one. "Did you know where he was?" "Of course. I always know where he is. I have a tracker sewn into his jacket. The battery lasts a week, but I usually get it back after 3 days or so. He has dementia? Is that why he's wandering around? No, he's fine. We've had him checked several times. He just likes to walk in the woods. He's been doing it for 2 years now, and we haven't had any problems. It's true that sometimes I have to pick him up. If I tried to restrict him in any way, we'd have a problem. I held out my hand. By the way, my name is Solomon. I think I've spared you a trip. Ottilia, Micah is my grandfather. I appreciate you bringing him home, or did I already say that? Either way, come on in. I have hot coffee and cold beer. Your choice. Micah disappeared somewhere. I assumed he was taking a shower and changing his clothes. We talked for a while, and then Mika reappeared, freshly washed and shaved. Ottilie made dinner. For the first time in months, I ate at the table. It felt good. After lunch, Micah disappeared somewhere, and Ottilie gave me a tour of the property. They owned 640 acres of land, but most of it was wooded and mountainous. Not good for ranching or farming. However, it was beautiful here. Ottilie and I liked each other. Before I realized what had happened, I was invited to dinner and promised a hot shower and a regular bed for the night. A month later, I was still there. The winter was harsh, and Micah didn't like the snow. He spent the entire winter carving wood. He loved carving canes with unique patterns and handles. Of course, all the wood he used was from the property. I spent hours walking with him, weather permitting, looking for the items he needed. During the search, what caught my eye was the large number of cottonwoods growing all over the property. I happened to know that poplar bark carving had become very popular, but Mike was only interested in cane carving. Ottilie kept herself busy writing novels. She seemed to have a talent for it. Amazon and several other sites had over 35 ebooks on bodice rippers. She had developed a good audience, and new novels sold as soon as she posted them. They were cheap, but she was selling a lot of them. I made a living doing all the maintenance work on the house and outbuildings they so desperately needed. It seemed to be an ongoing project with no end in sight. The previous owners of the house had kept horses, so there was a full-size barn in the back of the house. Micah and Ottilie didn't like horses, so the barn was empty. I put the Rialta in the barn next to a utility vehicle that looked like it had never been used. It only took half a day to fix the ATV and get it up and running. I had a plan, but first I wanted to talk to Ottilie. Ottilie, we need to talk. She was working on her computer. Oh no! She leaned back in her chair, put the back of her palm to her forehead, and groaned. Naturally, I stood there with a confused expression on my face. Calm down, Solomon, it's a joke. I don't understand. Let me explain it to you. In all romance and erotic novels, when a couple has a problem of a sexual nature, they always have a conversation that starts with these 4 words. Usually one of them is going to tell the other about a dastardly deed he or she has done or is about to do. This great disclosure always leads to a rift between them. One of them is critically wounded, and the other is usually indifferent or vindictive, or something along those lines. It can go many, many ways. Oh, I just wanted to borrow an ATV. Well, that's a big disappointment. I was hoping for more. She smiled. Want a beer? Micah was sitting in front of the fireplace doing some wood carving. Ottilia had placed a chair with a tarp underneath to collect shavings. In the summer, she made him sit on the porch and do the carving. So, what do you need an ATV for? I spent the next hour explaining my plan to her. I had 3 distributors who were willing to buy all the poplar bark I could provide at wholesale prices. There was more wood on the property than we would ever need. We only harvested bark from dead trees, and there were so many on the property that there would be enough for many, many years. The only problem we encountered was shipping. There was no practical and economical way to ship the bark. Ottilie gave me her blessing to do whatever I wanted. She even agreed to have Mika help me. Mika was glad to have something to occupy his time. The delivery problem was postponed. After the cold weather passed, Mika and I had a few nice warm days to start our little project. We decided to tackle the easily accessible trees first. The biggest problem was that we had to go back to the barn often. The utility cart was not very roomy. Micah gladly took on the role of driver. Fortunately, the shed was large enough to hold everything we could pack. As the barn filled up, we cut down on the collecting. Micah and I slept well. Otelia and I never talked about ourselves or our situations. I didn't want to invade her privacy, and I think she felt the same way. It had been quite some time since I had left home, and I felt I should at least get in touch with my daughters. I didn't have a phone anymore, so I had to borrow Ottilie's phone. "Rosa, it's your father." They shared a dorm room, but I didn't know which one I would get. I recognized her voice. "Daddy, Daddy, is that you? My God, where the hell have you been? We were scared to death. Mom's freaking out. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, honey. Honestly, I'm fine. I just needed to get away for a while. I was afraid I might do something if I stayed. Didn't your mom explain that to you?" "Mom said she came home one day and was putting away groceries when you had a seizure and jumped out of the house. She said she hasn't seen you or heard from you since." "That's it? That's all she said?" "Yes. She sat idle for about 2 months, and then she went and got a job at the Target store to clean the shelves. They pay more for the night shift, and she needed the money. She doesn't pay her house payment and can barely pay her utilities. She said the bank was after her. Dad, what the hell is going on?" "Rose, I could try to get on the straight and narrow and tell you that your mother should tell you herself what happened, but it's a little late for that now. I don't want to be the bad guy, but your mother cheated on me." "Bullshit, I don't believe that. How do you know, and with whom?" "She spent the day having sex with an ex-boyfriend named Brad Mercer. While she was in his room taking a shower, he called me from her phone and bragged about it. When she got home, I kinda bumped into her and she just walked out of the room. That's when I left." "What do you mean by kind of bumped into her?" "She brought a hairdryer with her when she went to meet him. Why would a woman take a hairdryer with her to meet an old friend? It was intentional, and she knows I know it." "Damn it, Dad. Iris and I are going to visit her this weekend. We're going to work things out. Can I call you back at this number?" "No, it belongs to a friend. I'll block your number after we hang up. I'll call you in a month or so." "Okay, take care of yourself. Bye." I didn't know it, but Ottilie was standing nearby and heard the whole conversation, only from one side, of course. That night, after Mika went to bed, Ottilie and I sat in front of the fireplace drinking wine and making popcorn. Yes, I had firewood duties too. "I'm sorry about what happened between you and your wife." "You overheard?" "Yes, I couldn't help it. I think I understand, but I don't want to invade your privacy." "That's okay. She cheated and I left. It wasn't a big deal anymore. But now that everything is out in the open, tell me about yourself. Tell me what a beautiful, energetic young Jewish girl hiding out in Wyoming is doing." "Wow, you missed 3 points out of 4. I'm not pretty, I'm not bright, and I'm not hiding, but I am Jewish, if that matters." "You're avoiding answering my question." She sighed. "My husband cheated on me and he was murdered." "Killed himself. What the hell does that mean?" She leaned over and whispered in my ear. "Micah killed that son of a bitch." I'm pretty sure I heard her giggle slightly. Now I knew why they were in Wyoming. Micah was hiding and she was just taking care of him. Nice setup. We still hadn't figured out the best way to send the gaunt tree. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that we lost interest in trying to figure out a good way to ship the gaunt tree. I haven't made any attempts to sell the wood other than initial contacts with a few distributors. I kind of just forgot about it. However, Micah and I got into the habit of harvesting it. It was a therapeutic activity for both of us. It was a nice day, and we decided that instead of harvesting, we would spend our time clearing a few trails to get to the hard-to-reach trees. By the end of the day, we were both completely exhausted and were surprised to find the barn empty when we returned. Ottilie was smiling as we dragged ourselves onto the porch. She'd made a beer, though it was chilly enough for coffee. "What's wrong?" She was still smiling. "Two guys from Smoky Mountain Timber came here right after you left in your truck this morning. I showed him what was in the barn, and he wrote me a check for $4,800. They loaded it up and left before noon. I didn't know how much it was worth. I hope I did it right." Micah and I clapped at each other. It was strange doing that to a 70-year-old man from New Jersey. Otelia took it as a sign that it was okay. I had no idea how much it was worth, but as far as I was concerned, it was found money. It had been a good day. Now we were to fill the barn again. It was time to check on my daughters. "Hi, Rose. It's your daddy. Thought I'd check on you and see how things are going." Not so good, I'm afraid. Iris is here, so let me put you on speakerphone. How bad? Mom's in jail? Good! I'm all ears. We talked to Mom after our last conversation. She knew absolutely nothing about the phone call the guy made. She admitted that she was there and that they had sex, but she didn't know what he did or why he did it. 2 days later, she was arrested. Okay, but what was she arrested for? She shot him 5 times! Was he dead? No. She used your old .22 caliber revolver with hollow point bullets. She shot him 5 times just below his navel. It didn't kill him, but it sure messed up his plumbing. There were 6 bullets in him. Yes, that's what's funny. After she shot him, she called 911, and while she was on the phone, she deliberately shot herself in the leg. That doesn't make sense. We didn't think so either. She told us later that she did it so she'd have something to remember. Should I go home? No, she'll be out on bail in a couple days. I don't think she really wants to see you right now. She's sorry for what she did, but she doesn't want to talk about it with me and Iris, let alone you. Good. Well, I'll leave it at that then. I'll call you back a little later. Oh, Dad, one more thing. We think she's going to file for divorce. She said you probably wouldn't do it, and she's decided she's going to do it herself. She refused to discuss it further. The bank took the house. Life goes on. Things have mostly settled down. Audley went back to writing, and Mika and I went back to bark harvesting. The weather was nice, and we took advantage of it. And then I got the conversation from Micah. I wasn't expecting that. He hit me when we were on our lunch break. Solomon, my good friend, you're not carrying your share of the load. What are you talking about, old man? I do twice as much work as you do. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean at the lodge. I don't understand. There's not much work there. Audley takes care of just about everything, and when I try to help, she pushes me away. That's not what I meant either, damn it. Solomon, Audley is a grown woman in her prime. She needs male comfort. She needs strong arms and a warm body. You are the best and virtually the only candidate for the job. It's time for you to step up and be a man. Damn it, Micah. You're not implying what I think you're implying? You want me to sleep with your granddaughter? Hell, how do you know maybe she likes me? She's never said anything. Of course not, you idiot. She's waiting for you to make the first move. And what if she turns me down? What am I going to do then? I'll have to leave, and I don't want that. I like it here, and I don't want to ruin it. Solomon, trust me. She will not refuse you. Enough said. Let's get back to work. Micah was right, of course. There was no great revelation, no enlightening conversation. That evening, Audley and I simply bowed out and retired to her room. I moved into it the next morning. It was different, but still the same old thing. She looked content and I was ecstatic. Micah had been smiling all week. The weather was starting to warm up. Over the winter, we hadn't had time to trim the bark. When it was tolerable, we worked. The rest of the time, we rested. Mika worked on his canes and I tried my hand at bark carving. Learning on my own with online videos was fun. I used up a lot of Band-Aids. Audley was still writing her novels. The next week, things came to a screeching halt. Micah and I were picking out some trees to harvest next month. As we climbed the hill overlooking the cabin, we saw a state police car and 2 black sedans parked in front of it. We watched Audley chatting with several visitors for a while. She was acting very expressive, waving her arms and stomping her feet. It seemed very serious to me, but Mika was kind of laughing. Eventually, the 2 men talked her into letting them into the house, I assumed, to look around. I was sure they weren't looking for me because I hadn't done anything wrong. About Micah, on the other hand, I wasn't so sure. Micah, do you remember the place where we first met? He looked at me, smiled, and nodded his head. Can you meet me there in 2 days? He repeated his nonverbal answer. Micah took the few snacks we had with us, all the water, and quietly disappeared over the hill. Hopefully, Audley had his GPS chip fully charged. I continued down to the lodge and played dumb mercenary. They were really looking for Mika. Attilia had no idea how they had tracked down his lodge. In addition to the local police, there were 2 representatives from New Jersey and 2 federal agents. It seemed Attilia's ex-husband was an important man. I have no idea why it took them so long to find Micah. They had gotten all the blood out of Attilia, but they weren't interested in me at all. That was nice. They left after a few hours, but they didn't look happy. Audley, however, was thrilled that I didn't take Micah with me. She didn't ask me where he was. I didn't offer to. We relaxed that evening and most of the next day. "I assume you and Micah agreed on something?" She phrased it as a question. I smiled and nodded. That was something I'd recently learned from an old man. "Do you have his passport?" She smiled, stood up, and left the room. A few minutes later, she returned with an Israeli passport and an envelope containing $10,000. Throughout the afternoon and evening, we checked several times to see if anyone was watching the lodge. There wasn't. The next morning, Micah was where he was supposed to be. He was hungry and a little chilled, but in good spirits. 15 hours later, I dropped him off at Regina International Airport. I offered to go with him, but he insisted that it would be better if he did it on his own. I was sure he would be put on the no-fly list in the States. After a good steak dinner, I settled into my room and got a good night's sleep. The following evening, I returned to the lodge. I called my daughters and learned that Marcy was now in Muncie and working from 5 to 8. They wouldn't go into details, nor did I ask them to. The good news was that I was no longer married. Some prisoner advocacy group had helped Marcy file the papers and finalize the divorce in less than 90 days. Reluctantly, I gave Rose the address of the lodge. I really needed that piece of paper, and I didn't see anything wrong with it. Since Micah refused to return to Wyoming for the wedding, Audley and I were married in Haifa. Micah gave us the ranch as a wedding gift.